is a lifestyle. Sports cards and we live now.
Jeremy Lee in the building and every guest that you ever needed. Sports cards after hours keep the hobby heated. Updates, hobby talk like you never seen it. Sports cards live and none could ever beat it.
Sports cards is a lifestyle. Sports cards and we live now.
Welcome to another episode of Sports Cards Live with your host, Jeremy Lee.
All right, everybody. Welcome to episode number 114 of Sports Cards Live. It is Saturday night, September the 11th, 2021. My name is Jeremy Lee. And before we do get into the show and the thank yous and the shout outs and all that, just want to recognize the heavy day that it is today and that it's been for, I'm sure, everybody. And but we're going to go ahead with the show and have an enjoyable evening and hopefully a nice way to wind down everybody's day. I do want to thank last Saturday's guests. We had Reed Casaoka from Dave and Adam's Card World, and we had John Reichard, Wade Boggs fan. A couple of great episodes. Go check those out if you care to. They are on the YouTube channel. I also want to thank Lou Papa for joining me last Sunday on the first episode of Collectible Live on the Collectible YouTube channel, and join me again tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Eastern when my guest on Collectible Live will be Mike Kantz of MC Sports Cards on Instagram. Later tonight on After Hours, joining us will be, for his quarterly appearance, Ryan Nolan from Breakout Cards with an update on all the card shows that he has been to over the last couple of months. Next Saturday on Sports Cards Live on the early show, Adam, the Real 27 guy, will join me to cover the PWCC Premier Auction yet again. And on After Hours, YouTube favorite Joe Labello, also known as, you may recognize this name a little bit better, Silver Jackify, will be joining me next Saturday. As announced, guys, I am working with Collectible now on Sunday nights and very excited to be doing that. So again, as I just mentioned, check out the show tomorrow night. Really looking forward to spend some time preparing for it today. So we're going to have a great show tomorrow. And also want to welcome Whatnot, working with Whatnot now. Very proud to have them as a supporter of the channel and just a great group of guys over there. So I will be doing a live on their app in the next month or so. So I'll make more mention about that as the weeks go by. I do want to shout out my guys at the Big Three Hockey. Give them a follow on Instagram right there. And the Summit Show, which was canceled, was supposed to be next weekend, has been canceled, unfortunately. So just want to let everybody know that if you were planning on going, cancel those plans. Shout out to all the podcast listeners. You know, I appreciate you guys. There's so many of you. And just really appreciate everybody who does listen to the show on podcast and all the viewers and subscribers. If you're new to the channel, please do subscribe. Greatly appreciate it. Just passed 3,650 subscribers like today. So on our way to 3,700. And that is just awesome. So thank you, everybody, for that. And hope to bring on more subscribers and welcome you to the Sports Cards Live community. As always, everybody, tonight, your comments, your questions, they will be in play. So let's get to tonight's guest. He's a founder, a visionary. He's an innovator. He's been a collector for his whole life and has a track record of successful entrepreneurial ventures. His favorite teams are the Detroit Tigers, Lions, and Pistons. We'll ask him why not the Red Wings in a moment. Favorite athletes are Dan Marino, Miguel Cabrera, Mickey Mantle, and Babe Ruth, originally from Grand Rapids, Michigan, currently hailing from St. John in the U.S. Virgin Islands. Let's bring him out. John Yob, welcome to Sports Cards Live. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I am doing well as well. Thank you for asking. Thank you for joining. So, John, you know, I'm a hockey fan. I've been a hockey fan my whole life. When I asked you what your favorite teams were, you listed all the Detroit teams except for the Red Wings. Please explain.
Yeah, you know, I was a big Red Wings fan back in the Stevie Y era as a player anyway, and I was a big fan during the sort of Colorado Avalanche days when they'd have those fights and whatnot in the late 1990s. You know, I was in college in Ann Arbor then and went to pretty much, went to a lot of games, but watched pretty much every game. So I was a big fan. Honestly, I stopped watching it a bit after the strike, like I think a lot of people did. And then when they weren't on TV as much. So I've sort of, I guess I'm a fair weather fan. I liked them in the 90s quite a bit, but hockey isn't my favorite sport. So.
Okay, well, I'm glad that you were a fan, at least in the Stevie Yzerman days. I mean, he's a legend, and he helped take the Red Wings from really the bottom of the league in the early 80s to Stanley Cup champions, and I believe in the early 90s. So Well done for him, and congratulations to your Red Wings back then. So we got to meet at the National back in August. I guess just very quickly, how was the National for you and Cardscore?
It was fantastic. It was a father-son experience to a large degree. I brought my daughter Cassidy to the Houston show, the TriStar one, when we first launched Cardscore, and then I brought my son AJ to the National this time, and it was a great experience. I spent a lot of time with my son. It was more hanging out with him than it was hunting for cards myself. We did the Panini box break contest and those kinds of things. So it was a great father-son experience. From a Cardscore perspective, it was also a great success. We got hundreds and hundreds of cards were uploaded by new customers. We essentially launched the project, the company on the national stage, signed up 20 to 25 stores to have our kiosks in them, had a great party with Bobby Hall. So it was a great launch for the product.
Right on. Yeah. And it was nice. You did invite me to the party with Bobby Hall. It was nice to come there, and it was great to just have a little chat with you kind of, and arrange for this show tonight, which I want to quickly tell the story why we almost had to delay this or reschedule. What was going on?
Well, we went to school in Ann Arbor. We're big Michigan fans, both my wife and I, and my son AJ about a week ago started talking about, well, Dad, we should really go to that Michigan Washington game. And at the time, Washington was ranked, and it was an attractive thing. So we reached out to you and sort of felt it out a little bit. But ultimately, when Washington lost to Montana last weekend, we decided, well, maybe that's not such a big game anyway. And so we're happy to be here.
Well, good. I'm glad that we could stick with the date. It's tough to reschedule these days, so I'm sorry your team lost, but I'm glad they lost as well. So, all right. Well, let's get into it. We'll start off by sort of getting into a little about you. You got your start in politics. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. I started as a political consultant, have since formed a number of companies, startups into successful companies. But I started as a political consultant, helped elect governors, senators, even a president. I was a national political director for John McCain for a long time and traveled with the senator, the late senator. And so I got my start in politics, but certainly we're not wanting to paint this company with a political brush.
Yeah, for sure. So tell us a bit about sort of you're a passionate guy. You like to collect. What are some things you're passionate about and that you like to collect?
I'm sort of a set collector. I like to build sets. I'm a vintage collector. Currently working on most of the sets: T206, 1933 Gaudi, 51 Bauman, 52 Tops, 54 Tops, etc. Mostly been focused on 52 Tops lately, trying to get a pretty high-end set put together. I'm not as much into the modern stuff. I don't know that I have the patience to sort of understand all the new cards that are coming out. I don't have as good an understanding as you guys do on all the different types of the modern cards. So I pretty much focus myself on vintage.
So, okay, well, that's good to know. I love vintage as well. Some beautiful cards for sure.
Yeah.
Give us a bit of a history on kind of, collecting cards as a kid. Maybe for interest's sake, your first memory of cards, and then get into sort of the story about your parents taking you to Radio Shack. Well, you were after a certain computer at the time.
Sure. My first experience with cards was when my parents moved my bedroom up next to the attic when I was about 6 years old. I discovered my brother's chest of then very moldy 1970, 71, 72 Tops cards. So that was my first sort of experience in discovering cards per se. But my first experience with the intersection of technology and cards was when I was a kid. I had an IBM PC Junior, and I was collecting a lot of cards. We'd use the computer to play games like King's Quest and very entry-level programming with BASIC and whatnot, but they didn't really have a good database management system or file maker. And so I kind of convinced my parents into taking me to Radio Shack to get me a Tandy 1000 so that we could begin tracking the cards and cataloging them. I went to a local card shop in a town, Lowell, Michigan, and I was very, very impressed that this gentleman had all the cards in the whole store cataloged into his system. And so for me, that was very impressive and something that I built on in terms of trying to bring more technology to the industry.
So, okay. So speaking about technology in the industry, obviously that's what you're doing with Cardscore, but the hobby's evolved over the last years, decades, even months at this point. How do you think it's going to continue to evolve over time?
Well, I think it's going to continue to evolve with more and more technology coming into the system. I think it'll evolve in some ways that benefit consumers, some way that benefit the powerful institutions involved, some ways that benefit the leagues, some ways that benefit the auction houses. I would like to use my skill set, expertise, and resources to try to bring more sort of power and authority in the hobby towards consumers, local card shops, and sort of a decentralized model, and maybe away from some of the pillars of the industry and the strong institutions in the industry. So I'm hoping that we can continue to evolve in positive ways with some new technology. I'm impressed by things like computerized grading and fractionalized cards and those kinds of things. But I also think there's some new things that can be added to the hobby. I use the example that in politics, there's sort of two ways to run a campaign. You can either poll the public and then tell them what they want to hear, or you can provide a new concept that sort of picks the curiosity of the public and throws a new concept at them and convince them to sort of like something that they never thought of before. And so, I think that's the way a lot of new technologies are launched. You may not have known you wanted an iPod until you heard what an iPod was and experienced it, and were told that you could keep 3,000 songs in your pocket. Same thing with iPad or remarkable digital paper, which I use a lot. So really any new groundbreaking technology sort of breaks the mold, and I think we're having that happen in quite a few circumstances today. One with Cardscore, obviously, another one with computerized grading, another one with sort of the fractionalization of the high-end card market.
All right, yeah, lots going on for sure. And you mentioned Fractionalized. I'm interested in that because I am working with Collectible, one of the more well-known fractional companies right now out there. Speak to your interest in fractional. I'm curious. Is it something that you are into? Are you investing in it yourself? What are your kind of personal thoughts on that?
I'm very intrigued by it. I know some people view it skeptically, but I think it's a very smart way to provide everyday collectors and consumers access to higher end cards. The old notion in collecting that you buy the highest graded card that you can afford, because the highest graded cards tend to go up at a higher rate per year than a lower graded card. So if you buy a Mantle 9 as an investment, it would go up at a much higher rate than, say, a Mantle 1. And so the thing that impresses me about something like Collectible is it provides access to those valuable assets that probably increase at a higher rate than the card that most consumers would be able to afford. So I'm very interested in it. I participate in it. I own, I don't know, 6 or 7 different assets in there. Nothing particularly valuable, more so for fun. But I do participate, and I do think that they're heading in the right direction.
All right, good. So what are some other of the innovations that have impressed you so far that, let's say in the last year and a half?
Obviously, crowdsourcing. I'm obviously impressed by that, but we'll get into that more, I know, in a little bit. But computerized grading, I think, is very, very interesting. I also am liking the proliferation of more peer-to-peer sales models. To me, it's sort of a broken model that an auction house gets 22.5% premium on the sale of a card. And I think it's to some degree regressive in that, if you have a very valuable card, then they pay you a premium for the right to list your card in their auction house above the hammer price. However, if you have a card that's only worth, say, $500 or $1,000 and you put it in there, then you probably, the buyer pays a 22.5% premium or something in that range. And as you know, a tax applies to both sides. So just because the buyer pays it doesn't really matter. Basic economics. But in my view, more peer-to-peer sales would definitely be a step in the right direction. So,
I mean, kind of redundant, but where should the hobby go in the future in terms of, in your opinion, let me put it to you this way. How is the hobby different than the rest of the world in terms of centralization or decentralization? And what are some examples of that from your perspective?
Yeah, that's something I talk about a lot. In pretty much every single thing in American life is decentralizing. Whether you're talking about mortgages or finance or stocks or crypto or real estate or how you educate your children online, et cetera. Literally everything is becoming more decentralized, working from home through Zoom, using crypto to essentially loan yourself money or loan other people money. So there's, everything in American life is decentralizing except for our hobby. For some reason, and in our hobby, for whatever reason, there is this move towards more centralization, more powerful institutions, consolidation, not just within sort of categories in terms of the folks producing the cards or the grading houses or those kinds of things, but also cross category, obviously now with some grading companies buying auction houses and those kinds of things. So in my view, we should be moving more sort of power and authority towards the collectors and towards the local card shops, and ultimately towards the kids, who are the lifeblood of our hobby for future generations. It'd be my view that the technologies that we come up with, that anyone else who's developing technologies in the hobby, I would hope that they would move towards things that would return more power and authority to those local card shops and everyday collectors, and maybe less in the hands of powerful institutions.
So with all that, you have created Cardscore. You feel that it solves some of those deficiencies within the hobby. Can you just describe the moment in your mind when it just kind of, the ideas all came together at the same time? You realized just how centralized the hobby still was, and how you had the wherewithal to maybe try and solve that. Was that an aha moment for you, or how did you kind of decide to, when all those ideas came together, go from just sort of thinking it to saying, I'm going to do something about it?
Yeah, I mean, I've long felt that an online system should be built for the purpose of scoring other people's cards and allowing people to score your cards. So I use the term scoring rather than grading, because I do believe scoring is a different product than grading. But I think, to sort of bring back that nostalgia of people sitting around with their albums at home, with their neighbors over, talking through the quality of each other's cards. To me, it was just very obvious that technology should sort of bring back that effort to compare cards and to essentially score each other's cards and set up guardrails for trades and those kinds of things. So to me, it was just very, very obvious that it should exist. I was frankly surprised that it didn't exist. And so that's really what Cardscore is it's really a platform for people to score each other's cards and for them to upload their own cards. So it's really just a platform, and it's really meant to be that it's oftentimes the same people doing that. So you can, upload your own cards to pay, but then you're also scoring cards at night, and doesn't even really end up costing any money because you make money from the scoring of cards. But anyway, to get back to the question, the key with it really was the technology, right? So conceptually, of course, we should be scoring each other's cards, looking at each other's cards online, of course. Then the technology is the key part. And the first hurdle that I had to get through was how do you upload a card securely so that nobody takes Photoshop to it before it gets up into the server, right? And so that was the first test. We developed this, it's called a score key. It's in the kiosks, if you see the kiosk behind me, but we also have them for home now. We call it home base. But this was really the first trick, in that this controls the scanner. So the person doesn't actually connect their scanner to their computer. So they're not running Photoshop or anything else on it, because the card never even gets to their computer. It goes directly from the scanner to this up to our server. So that was really the first hurdle. Once I knew that we could get through that, then I figured everything else was sort of possible. The next step was making sure the scores were accurate. So we just did a lot of it sort of internally with a big group of friends, and seeing how we viewed the scores would come out, sometimes hiding the professional grades, sometimes not hiding the professional grades, and seeing whether the scores were competitive with the professional grades. And we viewed that they were. I'm into political polling by trade, so I'm sort of a statistician myself, and I was pretty confident that if you got 50 to 100 collectors to score a card, that you'd end up with a pretty good number just based on the sort of stats. But once we did that and we saw the grades, then we knew sort of we met that step too. And then the final thing was digital fingerprinting, which is a really cool thing. We don't talk about it a lot because we haven't launched it yet, but we will be launching it very, very soon. And that essentially confirms that the card that you say is in the holder is actually the card in the holder. So, the card never leaves, yourself. So you don't send it anywhere. So it's up to you to put it in the holder yourself. We send you the holder, we send you the sticker, but you do it yourself. So the obvious question is, okay, well, how do you know the person put it in the right holder? It's the same card. How do you know it's not some card that's just a little worse than the one that was scored? And the answer to that is digital fingerprinting. So you can put the card either into your home system or into a kiosk at a store, and you can confirm that that is actually the same card that was initially scored into the system. So once we went through the stats, once we had the score key invented, and once we knew that digital fingerprinting actually worked, then we knew that it would work as a company.
Okay, so you've answered a few of the questions there, and I can see you've got We've got some Cardscore representation in the chat right now. Of course, we've got some resident skeptics as well. Let's go to the chat, John, and let's say hi to some of the people we have with us. I want to welcome Studio Sports, as just wait until Hockey on Saturdays comes out again. We have this and Hockey Saturdays. Can't wait for that, Studio. Troy, welcome to the show. Great to have you. DR, excited to hear John's story. Cardscore has been such a fun follow on Twitter. CJ, welcome to the show. CJ works for you, correct?
Yes, he does.
Yeah. Steve, sir, good evening. Rocco's back as always. Rocco, great to have you. Light up the lamp. Attaboy. Spurs, good evening. Mimona, good vibes to you. Studio, happy Saturday. Sam, great to have you. Junk Wax Gems is back. Dylan James, been looking forward to this conversation. See, John, I told you, people were looking forward to this. We couldn't reschedule. Brandon, great to have you. Interested in hearing what Cardscore is all about? Well, you're going to get to do that, and you have already a little bit. Brad, good evening to you. Skeppy back in the house. I made up that name. It's Cardscore. I'm not sure who this is, but someone from your company. Good. I'm glad you're there to answer some questions in the chat. Do you know who that is, John, so I can refer to this chatter by name?
I don't off the top of my head. I'm sorry. Not
No
sure.
problem. Studio, thank you for the generous tip and donation. Much appreciated. Terry Fortune, good evening. We got Collectors League. I believe that's a Jeremy right there. Good evening, Jeremy. BT Sports Card. Interested to hear this interview. Michigan checking in. Pardcorn is in the house, of course. Let's see if Pardcorn's going to let us ask the questions before they do, but I don't think that's going to happen. Mike Wick, welcome and good evening. Show Me Otani, great to have you. Frank Schneider says, John, how is the great 1960 pirate and Virgin Island resident Joe Christopher? Can you answer that?
I don't know if I know Joe Christopher.
Fair enough. Colin Murray, good evening. Pardcorn throws out a comment kind of early. Why don't you let people get a feel for it before you ask that? But anyone else not feeling this company? Well, I hope those people are here so they can at least get figure it out for themselves after hearing from the horse's mouth. I think that makes sense. Steve Foley, great to see you. Thank you for joining. Sports Cards Nonsense says, is it true guys will slab their own cards? So, we're obviously going to get to that, but why don't you just take that one right now, John?
No, that's not true. It is true that we send you a case, just a one-touch, and a sticker for cards that have not yet been verified. Or certainly authenticated or encapsulated. So it's not an encapsulation, it's just simply a case. We'll get into it more down the road. We will be offering encapsulation, but certainly people won't be doing their own encapsulation.
Very good. Very good. Collectors League says people were scared of cars at one time too. Yeah, I hear that. Corey Carr says this company is going to get KO'd faster than Holyfield. What do you say to someone that makes just a stupid comment like that?
Well, it is a new thing. So, I don't directly compare it to professional grading. It is card scoring. It is an opportunity for people to give their opinions on each other's cards. So I don't doubt that if you compare it to different service levels, you may jump to that conclusion. But I think if you better understand what we're actually doing as a company in terms of the fund that it provides to the industry, the accuracy, servicing that sort of lower dollar market at the $16 service level, and then hear about what we're going to do down the road in terms of verification, authentication, and encapsulation, then I think you might have a different opinion.
Pardcorn again has this question for you. He says, the price point is way too high. Why am I paying $16 to Cardscore when SGC cost me $25 with a bulk submitter?
Well, what I would say is, again, scoring a card is a different product than professionally grading a card. We'll get into more competition with that level down the road when we do authentication, verification, encapsulation. But for now, the scoring of a card is different. And the reason that it is that pricing is because it is a community of people. The money goes to the scorers. So roughly half of the money goes to the platform and roughly half of the money goes to people that do the scoring. So the higher the price point, the more money the scorers make. And generally speaking, those scorers are the same people who are using the platform in the first place. So it's essentially the community paying itself, at least with half of that money.
Okay, I'm going to do one more Pardcorn question and possibly the last of the night. It says, what if the card is damaged between the time the card is scanned and slabbed? And I only say that because you do have people in the chat, or I guess there's a Cardscore person in the chat who is responding. Yeah. so we don't necessarily need to bring them up on screen if they're being handled in the chat already.
Okay. Again, we don't do slabbing yet, but in terms of the case that you put it into, the digital fingerprinting technology would pick up on that because it would be viewed by the computer system as a different card. So when you went to do the verification check at either a kiosk or in your home base unit from home, then it would essentially not identify the card. It would essentially come back as a different card according to the computer system, or not the same card that you initially submitted.
Okay, and Sports Cards Nonsense just wants to know a little bit about your history. Are you in the hobby? He's genuinely asking. He's never seen your name and wanting to know your hobby history. And I just wonder, like, do we expect to know everybody in the hobby? There's a lot of people that are kind of under the radar in the hobby. There's probably more you don't know than you do know, but yeah, I guess some people think they should know everybody. But what do you say to that, John?
I mean, I started collecting in 1986. I've been collecting most of the years since then, much more aggressively as I started having business success in roughly 2011. I have a very substantial collection. I would say, certainly the auction houses know who I am, but maybe not a lot of the book industry. I do go to card shows, internationals out in New Jersey a couple of years ago. So I active in the community, but I haven't necessarily been active like on social. So I'm not sure how else you would have.
I mean, you did show me a picture of some of your collection, and from what I saw, it is surprising that you've maintained your kind of privacy this long, because your collection it's very, 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 very impressive. I don't know, I'm not going to put a dollar value on it, but I mean, I think you have about 38 1951 Bowman Mickey Mantle rookies. You've got about a dozen Michael Jordan 86 Fleers, among a couple. I mean, you mentioned a couple of PSA 9 Hank Aaron rookies. I mean, guys, this guy's in the hobby. This guy is in the hobby. There's no doubt about it. Tom Bullard, good evening to you. Thank you for joining. Great to see you. Okay, let's move on. So, you know, I've heard you say that you see card scoring and the benefits of crowdsourcing as a way to return fun to the hobby, and even as a way to get kids involved. Can you speak to that?
Sure. I mean, the hobby is meant to be fun. It should be fun looking at each other's cards, assessing the condition of the card, deciding whether to trade the card. I enjoyed that part of the hobby pre-professional grading. I know a lot of people that I talk to, especially at card shows, that a lot of people don't participate with professional grading and just collect the raw stuff, you know. But I think the hobby is meant to be fun, and this adds that fun back to the hobby rather than just being an investment where you're gauging the value of the card based on the professional grade that it earns for that. This is actually back to kids who are sitting down with through you know, condition of each other's card, putting values on those, you know, guardrails and those kinds of things. I think it includes into the hobby. It introduces a process. A kid who just, you know, gets the valuable possession at 10 or 11 years old. He doesn't have $150 to PSA, nor does he have a couple of months for it to get back. But he might want to know, you know, what kind of condition it's in and what kind of condition it might have if he were to submit it. But they can learn about the importance of the condition of the card, because they can watch their father or mother or whoever else, older brother, whoever else, go through and actually use the scoring system. So they can actually zoom in on the card and check out the condition and sort of teach children to make sure they're keeping their cards in good shape, and then, you know, minor nicks and scratches have a big impact.
Okay, I want to welcome Fire to the show. Good evening, Fire Sports Cards. Okay, so talk about John. Your internet was a little bit in and out there. Actually, I don't know if you could tell, it was a little bit shaky. So okay. So could you get into a little bit about? You mentioned that you're not slabbing cards, which makes sense. How do you see Cardscore as far as competing with the incumbent grading companies, PSA, BGS, SGC? How do you kind of see yourself positioning versus them?
Yeah, well, first I'll say we don't currently slab cards. We will be rolling that functionality out in the future. We will be rolling out something called verification to actually check to make sure that it is the card in the case that you initially had scored. Then we'll be rolling out authentication, which will be decentralized and based on local card shops around the country. And eventually we'll roll out encapsulation. And so at that point, when we have verification, authentication, and encapsulation, which is weeks and months in the future, not years, then I think it will be more competitive with the professional grading companies. But for now, it's often very complementary with the professional grading companies. One, we serve a market that the pros aren't currently serving very well in terms of that $16 price point, in terms of the score being turned around in a couple of days or sometimes even one day, certainly within a week. And we also provide a specific metric if you're using it to score a previously professionally graded card, much like PWCC does their top 15% or top 30% qualifications. We provide a very specific metric to those often used, overused subjective terms such as great eye appeal, looks nice, or et cetera. So right now it's very complementary with the professional grading services. But even at the point where we do verification, authentication, encapsulation, there's nothing stopping us from adding computerized grading and professional grading. The crowdsourcing score is different than a professional grade. Now they're similar in their overlap, and they can both be used for similar purposes in terms of evaluating the value and quality of a card. But they are fundamentally different things. But nothing is stopping us from adding those additional services in the future.
So talk a little bit about actually when you launched the company. I want to go back in time a little bit. So how did you sort of make your first splash with Cardscore?
Sure. The first thing we did was we launched a project where we judged, I think it was 10 different Michael Jordan rookie cards that were all graded 8s. So a couple SGC 8s, a couple of PSA 8s, a couple Beckett 8s, and I think there's even a PSA 8.5 in there. It was actually a pretty cool project. The reason we did it that way was to see how the scores would be coming back, to recruit a bunch of scorers to participate in the process, and to see if there was a market for the service. And it went viral and it took off, and it was a massive success in my view. But it was also very, very interesting. So the results were very interesting. So in SGC 8, Michael Jordan actually won the contest. It scored out at a card score 85, but it actually beat a PSA 8.5. And so, which was very interesting to sort of compare the grading companies and how they performed against each other as part of the process. And that's part of the fun we want to do in the future as well, in terms of having little contests. So, you could do a lot of cool things with Cardscore in the future, so that everybody who wants to participate uploads a Reggie Jackson rookie and they compare to see which one scores the highest, or Reggie Jackson rookies that are all professionally graded 9s and see which one scores the highest. So there's a lot of sort of cool competitive things that you can do in that way. But we initially launched it with the Jordan project. Then we did a little bigger project with 30 1951 Mantle rookies that were graded of all different grades, ranging from 1 to I believe 6.5. I think was the highest we put into the contest. But to score them, to allow the public the opportunity to score them and to look at them and to compare them and to see how they came out. And so after going through the Jordan project and going through the Mantle project, it was clear to me that there was a market for scorers to participate, but more importantly, a lot of people out there that wanted to put their own cards into the system.
And so that's great. That's a really cool way to kind of get things kicked off. And now talk about what you're doing with kiosks.
Sure. So we're installing kiosks in local card shops across the country. We believe that it's important to make these local card shops the sort of the community centers that they should be of our hobby. We think it's critically important to get more kids involved in the hobby, having those sort of father-son, father-daughter, mother-son experiences where you take them to the local card shop and participate. And so we're installing 60 kiosks right now across the country. We have, I think, 40 or 45 of those or so installed so far. I think we have most of them, if not all of them, already spoken for in terms of card shops that want them. And then after that, we launched Cardscore Home Base, which is essentially where you can put a kiosk essentially in your house. It doesn't have all the fancy bells and whistles from in terms of how it looks, but from a functionality standpoint, it's the same as the kiosk that you would have there. And those kiosks will do not just the initial uploads, but they'll also shortly here in a couple of weeks, they'll be able to do the verification check to make sure that the card that the person puts into the case is actually the card that was scored.
And that's something that a lot of people are kind of concerned about, is how do you make that link between the card and the card that was actually scored. But I mean, the way you've explained it to me was that's not necessarily the number one motivation for Cardscore. So I'm going to segue into that for a minute. Like, in the absence of a connection between the card and the sticker and holder that you send out, what are some other benefits to the service besides that?
Well, there's a lot of benefits to the service. Number one, it's fun, as we've already described. Number two, it brings in a lot more kids into the process. It introduces them to the grading and scoring process. Number three, the scores come back solid. You know, if you do it blindly with professional grading, you'd be amazed at how similar they come back to professional grades. And it's obviously on a 0 to 100 scale, so it has a little bit more precision to it, as well as with subgrades. Number four, it's I call it a check on the pros, but as we previously described, it's very similar to PWCC's top 15% or top 30% calculations. It provides that specific metric to those overused terms, subjective terms such as grade I appeal or undergraded or other terms that are used to describe a card that they think didn't grade out to where they think. Number five, the decentralization returns sort of the authority to card shops and collectors, sort of decentralizes a key component of the marketplace. And number six, it will be the product that will be more competitive with the professional grading systems once you have verification, authentication, and encapsulation. And number seven, it's quick and cheap. And so it's $16 and you get your score back in about 2 days.
Talk about Cardscore Raw, because so far we've been talking mostly about grading cards that are already slabbed and sort of, having an idea of whether it's not all sixes are the same. Is it an average, a weak, or a strong six? What about Raw, and talk about the launch of that product?
Sure, we launched Cardscore Raw at Nationals. When we first did the Jordan project and the Mantle project, we were sticking with professionally graded cards, largely for the reason that that you're questioning in terms of the authentication and whether it is actually in the case that is described. And so as a result, we stuck with the professionally graded cards at first. But once we got the digital fingerprinting mastered to where you can actually check to make sure that this actually is the card is in the proper case and with the proper sticker. Once we got the digital fingerprinting figured out, then we sort of felt like it was time to launch the Cardscore Raw product. We launched that at National, and it has turned out to be a big hit and a big success, and that's definitely where the majority of our revenues are currently coming from.
And home base, you mentioned earlier home base. So basically bringing the kiosk into the house. Talk about that. What's your plan for rolling that out?
Sure. We rolled it out roughly a week ago. We have 150 units in the first, what we call phase 1 beta launch of the project. Those are have been selling very fast, and we have I think some left, but they'll sell out very soon. Once that's through, we'll go through the testing process and work out any kinks if there are any. We haven't really found too many or any yet, but we assume once there's 150 people hitting it a day at a time that we may need to work out some new kinks. Once that's up and running to the point where we want it to be, then we will launch it nationally. And our hope is to get the kiosks into roughly 250 stores in the next 3 months or so. And our plan is to get 2,500 of these home bases and homes by this time next year.
So, I think about like the old days when you didn't ever imagine having a computer in your house. And by the old days, I mean like probably the mid 80s, right? When I was a teenager. And now you'd never think about having a grading or a scoring machine in your house, but that's what you're really trying to do.
That's what we're doing. I mean, it is, I use the term scoring rather than grading. It is a different product. So, it's like saying an iPad is the same thing as an iPod. They are different things. There's some overlap in terms of what they do, but they are different things that provide a different service. So we do in-home scoring right now. But, we're in the beginning phases of all of this. There's nothing that prevents that from becoming a computerized scoring system rather than a crowdsourced scoring system. So we'll see where the company goes in that way. But for now, we are putting card scoring systems into homes across America.
Right. So you're very sort of deliberate with respect to the distinction between grading and scoring.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. There is an overlap of use case, but they are not the same thing. And so a lot of the tough questions that you get, or people who think they have tough questions, they're largely coming at you from the perspective that we're claiming that it is exactly the same as professional grading. It's not. We don't say it is. There is some overlap in use case, and they have sort of some similar use cases, but they are different products.
Yeah, I saw in the comments someone said, so why wouldn't I just go to professional grader?
Well, it's not very fun to send your card in and wait a few months or whenever to get it back. So hopefully the folks who are participating in the process view it as something fun to do, to score other people's cards and to see what 50 to 100 people think of your particular card. So that's step one. Number two, it's a $16 price point. So if you are assuming that it is the same product, even though we emphasize that it's not, but if you are comparing them on a one-to-one basis, then it is at a lower price point with much faster turnaround time.
So Ian Undercover has a good question. How does maintenance of the machines work as far as the kiosks in local card shops?
Sure. We have a customer service department that handles the service-related items. These score keys really are neat little machines. So they actually update over Wi-Fi. So we can update them remotely. So when we add new software to them, that happens remotely. And so the product will improve over time. We haven't had too many maintenance issues. There are some sort of customer service questions and those kinds of things that largely are dependent upon your quality of your internet connection. We do recommend that you use Ethernet. It is Wi-Fi compatible as well, but an Ethernet connection gives a stronger, more stable connection.
Okay, good stuff. I just want to thank Bargain Hunter Thrift for the comment. Thank you for providing interesting interviews. You are more than welcome. I'm glad to do it, and thank you for the tip for the host. Much appreciated right there as well. Okay, let's talk a bit about the future, what you're planning to do, because I do have some questions on the end. A lot of them are being asked in the chat, but I do have some that I'm going to get to. So if I'm ignoring any in the chat, it's because we are going to get to them anyway. But you've talked a bit about the next steps. So I'm going to ask you to get into it a little bit more. Cardscore verification. So all of these, and it seems to me like all these future services that you are looking to offer are the result of a lot of the questions and concerns that maybe some potential customers or the hobby has had. So talk about Cardscore verification. What is it, and when do you think it will roll out? Price point, all these things.
Well, I'd start by saying that those were questions that I had as well. I'm not naive to the hobby. I've been a collector for decades now. And so those questions that you're referring to are the same questions I had when I was trying to figure out whether to establish this company or not, and whether to do the Mantle project and the Jordan project that we thought of. And really, we decided that we didn't really want to make it a company until the point where we perfected what's called verification. And so now, either at home or in a kiosk, you can take the card in. Here's a Baker Mayfield card that scored a 90, and you could go in, you could put it into the kiosk in a store or into your home-based system from home, and you can confirm that the card in here is actually the card that was scored initially. Now, if the card is damaged or something else, then it'll come back essentially not as a match. And so the computer will essentially say it's not the same card. Now that's because the card was damaged or whatever else. But regardless, it needs to be the same card in the same condition in order to get that match. At that point, then the card will have been verified. If you would like us to do it, we can do a verification sticker on it that sort of wraps around tamper-proof sticker. But regardless, for the purposes of trading or making sure that the person gave you the right card or sold you the right card, you can put it into the verification system. The next step is authentication, which is, one thing, the question you didn't ask is, how do you know the card that was scored is real? And not like one of these Jordan reprints or something. And for the purposes of scoring itself, the fact of the matter is you don't know for sure. I could tell for the vast majority of cards just by zooming in, especially vintage cards, and seeing sort of the print patterns. I'm sure you can as well. Most people who've been in the hobby for a while can tell whether a card's real if you can zoom in far enough on it. But regardless, the fact of the matter is you don't definitely know that it's real, and we don't claim that a card that has been card scored is, just giving a score to that card. However, when we launch Cardscore Authentication, then in card shops across the country, I'm not going to get too into the weeds in terms of how we're going to do that yet for competitive reasons, but suffices to say the places where we have kiosks will be able to provide an authentication service that will confirm that your card actually is real as well, and then that'll be added to the sticker. And then finally, there will be encapsulation, which will be handled in the same manner, similar manner that the stores that have kiosks across the country will also be able to offer an encapsulation product. We haven't finalized the sticker yet, but here would be an encapsulated Cardscore card, for example.
You know, it came up on a previous interview I had on the show where the guest actually made the comment. The guest was Jeff Wilson from Sports Card Investor, and he said that he can see a day where you can go into a card shop, give them your card, it will be authenticated, graded, and slabbed and handed back to you, whether that's, you know, same day, next day, whatever, but that you could just go do it like that. Is this what you're trying to do, or is this something that, you know, is evolving from Cardscore that you're going to try to accomplish? Yes.
Yeah. The only question is whether it's in 2021 or 2022. It's happening very soon, and that day will come very, very soon.
That's big news right there. I want to bring up this comment from Game Time Gallery. He says, it's too bad that all the new business models draw ire from the hobbyists. I had the same negative view when I first saw a graded card at the 1990 National. I have an open mind now. Yeah. Very, very fair, logical type of comment. What does Nathan say? One of the big three will be holding on to my order for nearly 12 months for a 1-month paid service. This slow speed opens up the landscape to competitive entrants like Cardscore. It's an open-minded type of comment right there. Skeppy says, how does the technology compensate for scratches or imperfections on the slab or the case the card is in? Great question.
Well, that is a question related to professionally graded cards. So we have, two services. I would say maybe 92% or so of the cards being submitted right now are raw. So that isn't a factor for those. But if you have if you are scoring a professionally graded card that is already encapsulated, then there is potential for that discrepancy. However, in the vast majority of them that I have seen, I can tell the difference between a scratch on the case and something on the card. The bigger thing is really just wiping the case clean. Like sort of most people when they send in their cards to get professionally graded, they clean the card or wipe it off to make sure there's not fingerprints or dirt or anything else on them. And you should just use a similar strategy with the slabs that you put into the device.
As far as the whole suite of services and price point cost, is Cardscore, whether it's in 2021 or 2022, going to be able to be competitive with I'm not talking about turnaround time, because we know that that's a huge issue right now. But as far as price point goes, taking turnaround time out of it, just for the sake of discussion, is it going to be competitive as far as price point?
I think so. I don't know when PSA will relaunch their sort of value-based product or bulk. I forget the term they use for it. So I don't know what price point they'll be at or what the turnaround time and those kinds of things will be. But again, from our perspective, half the money goes to the scorers. And so turnaround time is actually an important part of our model. Unlike the professionals, we don't change the price based on the perceived value of the card. We only change the price based on the turnaround time that you want. So essentially there's 3 service levels: $10, $20, and $30. And then $6 to handle the shipping and handling. But essentially, if you choose the $30 service model, then your card essentially gets bumped to the top of every scorer's list, so that you get your card returned much quicker. So if you pay the $30 level, you probably get your score back the next day or within 48 hours. If you choose the $10 service model, then it might take 5 to 7 days.
Okay, appreciate that. Third and long, you just gave me the best advice. Yeah, guys, so I just have to speak to the chat right now. I'm going to start ignoring comments because you guys are clogging it up and it's just too distracting. So unfortunately, I'm turning chat off. And at the end of the show, when me and John are done our discussion, I will consider going back to more comments and questions. So I am now, John, no longer going to be looking at the comments from the chat. I hate when this happens. It's happened once or twice before in 165 episodes, but there's a few people in there that are just being a little bit disrespectful towards both of us. And instead of me sitting there and blocking and putting them all in timeouts, I'm just going to ignore it altogether, okay, for both of our benefit. Talking about scorers, how are they compensated? How many are there? How are they vetted?
Sure. There's roughly 5,900 scorers have signed up to score cards. Roughly 1,000 of those meet our threshold per month to be compensated. Even if you only score a few cards, you still build up a balance. But in terms of actually hitting the threshold for the funds transfer to occur, we have roughly 1,000 of those. In terms of how they're compensated, roughly half of the value, half of the price of the scoring of a card is paid to the scorers. So if the card is entered at the $30 level, then roughly half of that, roughly $15, is paid out to the scorers. If it's entered at the 10 level, then roughly half of that $5 is paid out to the scorers. We do have a system for scoring the scorers. As part of our system, before we calculate the average of the 50 scores that you receive, we throw out outliers and look for sort of discrepancies, and those who tend to be outliers end up being kicked out of the system or sort of de-emphasized within our system in terms of the cards that they can score. So there is a system for scoring the scorers. It's anybody who's had much experience in machine learning or sort of big data. That the more data that you get in, the better your data becomes, and the better the product that you offer becomes. And so over time, as we score those scores, I believe the scores will also improve. But when you take the average of 50 or 100, whether or not you have 1 or 2 or 5 that don't do as good of a job, if you're throwing out outliers, it doesn't really have an impact on the final grade. But we're impressed with the scores that have been coming back so far. We want to thank the scorers who participate, the 5,800, 5,900, I think, who have signed up so far, and 1,000 or so that use it regularly, a lot of people daily. So we want to thank them. They're a big part of the effort, and they're what makes the company succeed.
So you've said, between 50 and 100 scores per card. What determines, if I submit a card to Cardscore, what determines exactly how many scorers are going to review my card?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, we are learning as well as everyone else, right? So when I first came up with the idea, I just said, we'll have 100 people score every card, right? And then so once we did, I don't know, a few hundred cards, I had my guys look back and say, okay, what is the difference? What's the standard deviation? What's the difference between if we just do 50 scores, or if we do 100 scores, or if we do 25 scores? And we essentially showed that there was very, very, very little change in the overall number between whether you use 50 scores or 100 scores. But there was a discrepancy as you got down to, say, 20 scores. And so in our view, 50 is sort of that magic number. And so on most cards, I would say that they get, say, 58 or 60 or 50, somewhere between 53 and 58 scores. And then the outliers are removed. And so you pretty much, I don't want to say every card, the vast majority of the cards are getting 50 that are weighted into that calculation prior to giving you your score.
And you mentioned outliers. So are outliers automatically kicked out, rejected? Is that done by algorithm, or does somebody go in and have to look at these things and say, hey, that one is obviously not an accurate assessment of the card? Like how, I guess, and I'll let you answer that, but I do have a follow-up, which is going to be, just to give you the heads up, which is going to be, does a human go in after collecting all the scores and kind of make sure that they make sense, that they're not just, a score isn't just in there giving a 5 to every single card to pump through a bunch of cards.
Yeah, I mean, sometime I'll show you actually sort of how the back end of it works, but sort of it's very interesting to see, especially sort of in real time, and check it out. You learn a lot about people and stuff. But the way the system works is essentially anyone that our algorithm views as a potential outlier, even within subcategories, but essentially pops up with it's highlighted in red in our system as sort of a flag. And then a human goes in and sort of analyzes each one of those flags. And so, we can also tell sort of how often that particular scorer tends to have flags. And our flags aren't just an outlier in the traditional sense in terms of being far outside the mean or median. Instead, there are also things like, always giving the same score, or I don't know how much of this I should give away, but bluntly, not spending enough time scoring the card, because we can time it as well, right? So we know where you are on the corners. If you don't look at the corners, then we're not going to take your score into account, right? And so we have a number of things in the algorithm that spot and flag what we generally term as outliers, but it's more sophisticated than simply being outside the mean or median.
And are the scorers given any training or guidance ahead of time? And how many metrics are they scoring per card?
Well, there's 4 subgrades in terms of what they score. We have some training videos. We do intend to invest more in that side of the business moving forward, and do more training videos and training sessions and seminars and those kinds of things. But we also, the more data that you have on these scores, the more that you can learn about those scores. And so I'll be the first to say that I think that over time, the quality of the scoring will improve dramatically. But again, a score is, I shouldn't say dramatically, because when you average 50, nothing's going to happen dramatic. But in my view, it will become a more precise scoring as the scorers have more experience, as the algorithms have more data to work from. But again, you're not going to have a lot of changes because you're averaging 50.
Yeah, no, that makes sense to me. Let's talk a bit about the hardware. I can see a couple of kiosks behind you. So I have seen people comment on social media and such that it's just an Epson scanner. Can you speak to, is an Epson 600 scanner, is that good enough for what you're doing? And maybe describe a bit more about what the kiosk is.
Well, this is the magic here. So the score key is the patent pending device that sort of controls everything. The Epson scanner is just a V600 scanner. Yes, there's nothing magical about the scanner. The magic is how we upload in a secure fashion the file to our servers so that you can't manipulate it either at the kiosk or at home. But other than that, it is a basic V600 scanner. It's the only one we use now. We may allow the home base units to connect to additional scanners in the future. But at least for the launch of the company, we really wanted to make it so that every scan was in the same quality, using the same scanner, so that you didn't have a less high quality scanner uploading images to the same system as this scanner, so there'd be a difference in sort of the image quality. And so we really want people to use the V600, but it does have to be connected to a score key device.
So the consistency is the important thing there, and the resolution of the V600 scans with the right settings are conducive to grading at so that the scorer can see and spot, edge, corner, centering issues. Surface, is that kind of the toughest part?
Yeah, I mean, we thought long and hard about whether to include surface and sort of how to include surface. We view surface slightly differently than maybe the professionals do. One of the interesting things when I first started submitting a lot of my personal collection for grading 5 years ago or so was I like to use the example of 1954 tops, because if you get like a PSA 9 1954 Aaron, it's got sort of a nice shine to it, right? And you could have an Aaron that is just as good of quality in terms of the corners and the edges and even the coloration, but it is sort of dull rather than that shine, and you submit it and it might come back a 7 or even a 6 or something. And so the professional grading companies in my view, take into account sort of the gloss and the finish of a card more so than I ever knew before I started submitting my own cards and wondering why the grades came back as they did. So, in this card score system, I would say it would be harder to detect sort of that finish of the card and the gloss and whatnot of the card. When we talk about the surface, we're talking more about like surface wrinkles and those kinds of things that you can see when you zoom in on the card.
Okay, let's talk a bit about the card shops that are hosting these kiosks now. I'll put it quite bluntly. What's in it for them?
Sure. So it's traffic, people come in and out of the store more often. A, because they want to get their cards scored. B, because they want to do the verification check after. C, will be launching both authentication and encapsulation at some point. So it's a pretty cool service that they'll be able to offer. They do get revenue from the machine. So they get, I think it's roughly 5% or so of the gross revenue that comes from the machine. But ultimately, it's part of this effort to make local card shops into the community centers that they should be. So rather than ship your cards off to California or Florida, you can just bring them down to the local card shop, spend time at the local card shop, go to the local card show, upload your cards, hang out with fellow collectors, and be part of the community.
So I'm curious, what sort of feedback are you receiving from customers who have been using Cardscore? Actually, before that, can you give us, you may not want to for competitive purposes, but are you willing to give us any idea of how many cards have been through the Cardscore process?
I don't want to give you specific numbers, but it's thousands and thousands. It's a lot of cards. Anytime if you go in there, sign up as a scorer, and you can see there's plenty of cards in there to score. And so it's beating all of our expectations, and we're certainly hitting all of our metrics. I think it's better to be lucky than good, that people like to say. But the timing is sort of right in the industry, right? People are spending more time with their cards. The professional grading companies weren't able to meet the demand that occurred because of COVID, and more young people are getting into the hobby for the first time maybe in years. And so I think the timing was right, but it's certainly been a big success so far.
And
our biggest challenge there, if I got one more thing, our biggest challenge there is really sort of market penetration, because I heard one person on your show once say that there'll be a day where you can just take a picture of your card and get it scored or graded that way, but our system cares about the security of the file that you're uploading. And so if we could have just used a camera to take the picture of the card, and then every single person in America pretty much has a machine in their pocket already, then it would have been a lot easier to penetrate the market quickly. But based on our model, we sort of have to have a little bit slower growth model, because you have to have either access to a kiosk, or access to one of these in order to upload the cards in the first place. So I think that's good, because it allows us to get things done on the algorithms and those kinds of things that we want to. Sort of slow growth model is sort of better, but certainly we are meeting and beating all expectations that we had.
And so, what are the customers saying? What sort of feedback are you getting from customers? And why are they using Cardscore?
Number one, it's fun. Number two, it provides a service level that is currently not served by the professionals, or certainly not served in a cost-effective and timely manner. Some use it as like a pre-grading service. I know a couple of our stores in particular really push it as a pre-grading service. For my collection, I don't use it as much for that. I use it more for, in my collection, like cards that I probably wouldn't send away to get professionally graded, like a Larry Bird sticker card here. This one card scored a 75, so it'd probably be 7 to 8 in a professional graded environment. I probably wouldn't have sent it in to PSA and wait months or whatever and pay $150 to get it back. I probably wouldn't do that. So it provides sort of a service level to an underserved portion of the market, both in terms of age groups and experience in the marketplace, but also in terms of the cards that you would send in.
Okay. So I'm curious now about is this company something that do you have an investor group? Is this something that, where's the funding coming from? Just to keep it nice and clear, keep the question clear.
Sure. I'm 100% owner of Cardscore. I've funded it myself. I've had some success in other technology projects in the last decade or so, and so I'm 100% of the funding behind it. The other companies that I've started, I like to start with a very sort of agile system. We're doing a lot. We've already done a lot. We've only been doing this for 6 months or so, or less even, and we've come a long way very, very quickly. And if you had a big company with a lot of bureaucracy and investors who had their own opinions, and you probably wouldn't have been able to accomplish that much that quickly. And in order to do the things that we're planning to do in terms of verification, authentication, encapsulation, those kinds of things, we're going to need to stay agile. We have had people, including some folks who you would consider big names in the industry, reach out to us about potentially going another direction from an investment group perspective, but we so far have not done that. In my other companies, frankly speaking, I've usually started out with 100% ownership, and then over time bring in partners who sort of add something in that particular industry. So I don't doubt that at some point we will bring in additional investors, but it's certainly not on the short-term horizon.
Okay, no, very interesting. Appreciate the transparency there. I'm back into the comments now, and I'm looking for one. I'm looking for the ones that are actually worthy of our time. So Lucky K says, on average, how long does it take a scorer to score one card?
That's a good question. It depends on the scorer. We want it to take a couple of minutes at least, and if it doesn't, then we take note of that, and our algorithm takes note of that. Some scorers spend a lot of time. In fact, I think those of you who do like Google Analytics and those kinds of things with websites that you may control or have access to, who track sort of screen time, our average screen time is like 22 minutes. And so it's a long time to be on a website or an app for most people.
Okay, I shouldn't have come back into the comments, but this one's really funny. Anyone else feel like this Jeremy dude, I think he's talking about me, is a bit full of himself? At the end of the day, this is just cardboard, and this dude thinks he is a celebrity or something. So nice note. The sports card PT is in my head. Very nice. Very nice. Love it. Troy says, wrong comment. We are all here because we like cardboard. Don't hate on Jeremy. Thank you, Troy. Appreciate that. Appreciate that. Let's just, I'm just going to punt some people very quickly because I don't need that. Because I guess I'm full of myself. So I'm going to get rid of them. Not in my house, but thanks anyway. Okay. John, is there anything else like that we haven't talked about that you wanted to get the message out on? I'm gonna say quickly to the chat again, if there's any questions that you guys want to ask that haven't been asked yet. I've missed a bunch because I wasn't looking at the comments for quite some time. So if you want to ask any questions, please put them out there. We will bring them up. John, you're open to more questions tonight?
Yeah, of course, sure.
Yeah, okay. I appreciate that. So let's do that. If there's anything you haven't heard talked about yet that you have any questions for that have to do with Cardscore, they have to do with Cardscore. I am very happy to bring them into the show and to ask John directly. Mosaic Mind is late to the show. Is Cardscore a crowdfunding of scoring? Is that the idea? Yes, it is. Pretty much in one sentence, it is crowdsourced card scoring, which is different than grading. And John, I'm sorry to answer for you, but I believe that that's how you would answer it.
Can I jump in on that for a second? So
sure.
It obviously is crowdsourced scoring, which is different than grading, but it's sort of a funny comment. I'm a big Grateful Dead fan, and the great philosopher Jerry Garcia once said that it's not that we're the best at what we do, it's that we're the only ones who do what we do. And I think it's a very important distinction that crowdsourced card scoring is a similar yet different product than professional card grading. And so there is obviously a lot of overlap in terms of use cases, but they are very different products.
Thank you. DR says, John, does all the technology you need exist currently and you're just building the ecosystem out, or are there technological advances that need to happen for you to go to where you want to go?
No, it's all available. We already have the digital fingerprinting. And in fact, I was going to show it on my iPhone, but it didn't really look on the camera. I'll talk to my guys. Maybe we'll post some stuff on the blog where you can actually see how the digital fingerprinting works. It's really cool stuff to see. It actually does like a digital mapping of the card and can make sure confirm that it is the card or confirm that it's not the same card. So the digital fingerprinting already exists. The authentication piece is already in place, or at least we know exactly what we're going to do. If not having already built it, and then when we're already encapsulating cards, and so the technology is pretty much already there. We haven't gotten into the hybrid stuff in terms of the computerized grading yet. I don't doubt that at some point we might do that, but it's not in our short-term priority list in terms of the next few months or anything. So I can't speak too much to technological advances in that realm. But in terms of digital fingerprinting, authentication, encapsulation, all the technology that we want is readily available.
Okay, Jason Given says Sports Card Central just got our, I don't know who that is, just got our kiosk in yesterday. Lots of love on it already. Looking forward to the future with this. Overtime Grading says, what is the advantage to this compared to raw grading when BGS gets back to normal?
Crowdsourced scoring is fun. You get to participate in the process. You get to score other people's cards, and other people get to score your cards, and you're getting the viewpoint of 50 collectors rather than 1 or 2 professional graders. So it is a different product. It provides similar use cases. But again, it is meant to be fun and meant to be an asset to the hobby and something that adds value to the hobby.
Okay, hope that's sufficient for you, Rob. Hardcore says, how does Cardscore authenticate cards?
Sure. So as we talked about earlier on the show, we do not authenticate cards that are put into the card scoring system. However, we are after we launch Cardscore verification, we will then launch Cardscore authentication, and that authentication will happen at the kiosks at the local card shops that have the kiosks.
There you go. So, and I just want to clarify, because I think a lot of people assume that when you offer a service like this, that you are offering the authentication, or not that they assume it, but they expect you to do that. And I think to a degree, you kind of think, if I'm having my card graded, see, I think a lot of people in the hobby, when you send cards in for grading, a lot of people assume that every grading company can authenticate as well. And I've always questioned that, as far as, especially with the newer grading companies. I just don't have faith that they can authenticate as well as they can grade, because that,
the cards.
Yeah. So do you almost feel like, or have you had sort of any negative sort of response to the service with respect to the fact that you are not authenticating because people think you should be, or they expect that you should be?
Well, we are going to launch authentication, but in the short term, we are very much open about the fact that just because you upload your card from home and have it scored within our system, that we aren't authenticating as part of that service level. So there will be an authentication service level, but it all comes down to the same thing. If this service, if technology had been different, and if they never put that Wagner in the PSA case the first time, and crowdsourced scoring came out prior to grading, then this would be a totally different discussion, right? And so you guys and so a lot of folks in the hobby are looking at it from a lens of directly comparing it to professional grading, but it isn't a direct comparison to professional grading because it is a different product. Now, once you get the authentication step, the verification step, and the encapsulation step, then it is a lot more similar to professional grading. But at this point in time, the service that we offer is that you and your friends can compare and score cards of other collectors in the community.
Thank you. Mike Wick says, maybe I missed it. How does one become a member in the community? How would, for example, one become a scorer? I heard training videos portion, but just anything else. Basically, how does someone become a scorer?
Yeah, go to cardscore.com and sign up. We have about 5,900 people who have signed up, and it's easy to do, and you can make money doing it.
And I just put that up on the ticker right there. I think we hit this question already, but maybe not. Troy, how often or how long does it take for someone to score a card?
So the algorithm on both our pricing and our timeline is based on the inventory in the system. So if you pay the $30 price point and you move to the top of the line, if it's $10 price point, then your card's you're put in the back of the line. So it depends on whether you pay the $30, the $20, or the $10 in terms of how fast it takes. If you pay $30, you probably get it back within 24 hours, at least your digital sticker. You might get the actual sticker in the mail, within a week or so. But you should get your digital sticker via email within, 24 to 48 hours. If you go to the $10 level, then you're probably getting your digital sticker back in 5 to 6 days right now. But it all depends on the inventory in the queue.
Okay, and I think it came up before. How long does a grader or a scorer spend on each card?
It depends on the scorer. If they don't spend enough time, in our view, then they're flagged and either removed from the system or de-emphasized, as we call it. So we look over time at the scores in terms of all the cards that they've scored, how much they spent on each one. And if they don't spend enough, in our view, on either any subgrade, for example, zooming in on the corners, for example, then we flag them and they're dealt with within the system in a variety of ways. Some are removed altogether, and some are just de-emphasized, or some are warned in some cases. But it depends. I mean, we want them to spend a couple of minutes per card at least, but it doesn't need to be 10 minutes. But
so, what would you say? Do you in your mind, what's is it 2 minutes? Is it a minute? Is it 30 seconds? And I ask this because we often wonder how long they spend grading a card at a professional grading company. So.
Sure.
At the end of the day, it's kind of, we're still scoring, grading. We're still kind of assessing the condition of a card. So, and we're looking at this, you mentioned the 4 subgrades as you called them. I refer to them more as like metrics or criteria even, but what's the minimum you want someone spending?
I hate to sort of keep punting on it, but it really depends on the person and the card in some grades, but it really depends on the person. If you know what you're doing, you can get it done a lot quicker. I've scored a lot of cards now. I know how to zoom right down the corners right away, scan it, go back and forth, look for, creases, those kinds of things. And so if you know what you're doing with experience, you can do a quality job more quickly. If it's your first time doing it, it's probably going to take you a while. So it really just depends on the person.
Yeah, no, you added something there. It's not just about looking at the card. You actually have to be able to spend time zooming in, out, moving around. That could be
and frankly, it's deeper than that. It even matters, like, are you doing it on an iPad or are you doing it on a computer? Because the zoom functionality works a little differently. And so, if you are on an iPad and you can just quickly zoom in and whatnot, you can get a quality job done more quickly. If you're having to use your mouse on a laptop and that doesn't have a touch screen, it's a little more complicated. It takes a little more time.
PSA Slab Guy says, are you looking at a model where scorers specialize in areas like vintage, modern, and or ultra modern?
We get this question a lot. The scorers, and to some degree the customers, but the scorers really want us to move in that direction. It's being used in gaming cards as well. And so there are people who only want, gaming scorers to score gaming cards, and sports card scorers to score sports cards, sort of those kinds of things. So we currently don't do specialization, but certainly as we continue to build out the functionality, that's something that we're going to end up doing.
Mosaic Mind says, does Cardscore evaluate cards upon a sliding scale of age? Will a T206 scoring criteria be the same as a 2021 Topps card, for example?
We certainly encourage our scorers to be consistent. I know there's a lot of questions as to whether the professional grading companies use sort of a sliding scale based on the type of card and sort of the difficulty in it maintaining its quality. I don't know whether that's accurate or not, but I know a lot of people talk about that. Within our system, it's ultimately up to the scorers, but we encourage our scorers to be consistent.
Okay. OG says, can you explain what the real value is of some random people giving card scores provide? So let me just reword it for OG Fat Snacks. Basically, what is the real value of random people giving card scores. What is the value of that to the hobby?
Well, it's a lot of fun. It includes a lot of people in the hobby who can sit home and score other people's cards and participate in the hobby in that way. 6,000 people have signed up to do it so far, and are doing it every day. So they're currently enjoying it, and obviously providing value to the hobby. We talked earlier a lot about how it is serving an underserved market in terms of price point, turnaround time, those kinds of things as well. But again, I do want to emphasize that it is a different product than professional grading. If you have a 1954 Aaron that you think is going to grade at a 9, then I would recommend that you send it into PSA, and because that's the better place for a 1954 Aaron that would grade a 9. I would card score it too, because that is a different service and that can provide some additional interesting information and be fun to the process. But if you're asking me a question when you use the term value, if you're talking about sort of dollar value as strictly an investment vehicle rather than as an enjoyment hobby vehicle, I would say that a big part of Cardscore is the enjoyment side of things.
There's some comments in the chat. Basically, you've used the word, you've used fun as a reason for this, and people are kind of snickering at that. Do you want to respond to that at all?
Yeah, I mean, I believe that the hobby should be enjoyable. I mean, I think that sitting around as a kid and going through your binders and judging other people's cards is an enjoyable part of the process. And I think that we need to move the hobby more towards it being a fun and enjoyable process, and maybe less away from the investment side of things. I mean, I certainly have a vast collection that has a high investment value, and I do use it as an investment vehicle as well. However, the hobby is meant to be fun and meant to be enjoyable, and so I certainly don't laugh at that part of things. I think that's a critical component to our hobby.
Okay, sports cards nonsense. I'm just going to read this verbatim and let you respond. Do you think it could be dangerous to encapsulate cards that are not authentic? Does that open the hobby up to risk of fraud?
Of course, yes. We don't encapsulate cards that aren't authentic. So we haven't yet launched our encapsulation service, but at the time that we do, we will have an authentication step that is part of that encapsulation service. And so the cards that we do encapsulate, we will be vowing are authentic.
Matthew Jones says, how much does the machine cost?
It's a great question. The smaller one, if you include the screen, the box, the scanner, and the score key and everything for a shop, I think it's in the 1,300 range or something in that range, maybe 1,400. The bigger ones are much more substantial and are more in the $3,000 range, or 35, I think just under 4,000 range. The score key itself, if you want to do it from home, is about $130 online. In terms of card shops that want to have a kiosk, we have a pretty aggressive program to assist them in the financing of that kiosk.
Ink Paper Wax Collector says, how does a shop get set up with the machine?
Contact Cardscore, and I think we have a few left. I think most of the initial round of 60 kiosks are spoken for, and then we have another 150 in this beta phase of the home base units. But there might be a few kiosks still available. I think mostly a few big ones. I think all the small ones may already be spoken for.
Okay, couple of non-softballs coming. JJ Bama says, cool idea, but I don't see any value add for paying for this. It's next to impossible for any new company to crack into this market due to lack of credibility. How do you respond to that type of comment, John?
Well, it's only $16 or $10 if you don't want the sticker shipped to you, if you just want the digital sticker. And so, it really is serving an underserved market and adding enjoyment to the hobby. Again, this isn't this is a different product than professional grading. It is crowdsourced card scoring. In my view, the biggest hurdle of all these different questions is that we are literally inventing a new thing into the hobby. It's not that we have now come up with a new grading service that's competing with PSA or SGC or whatever else. That's not what we're doing. Now, there is some overlap, in terms of the value of crowdsourced card scoring versus professional card grading. However, there are different use cases as well, and so the biggest challenge is getting people to understand that difference and prior to getting into their questions.
I should go to a model tonight, John, where I'm only going to answer questions that tip the show. Might be a bit easier. So let's go to Bargain Hunter Thrift. Says, so graders, if they can do 20 cards an hour at 15 cents a card, will make $3 an hour for being a grader.
Well, it's scoring rather than grading. The amount that they would make is dependent upon what cards are in the queue and the service level that those customers chose to use when they were submitting those cards. That said, no, I wouldn't quit your job tomorrow to become a scorer with Cardscore. It's meant to be a platform where people log on to score other people's cards, their friends and other people's cards, and then also upload their own cards. And so in real terms, there's a lot of overlap between those people. So essentially it's the customers who are scoring other people's cards and vice versa. And therefore it's meant to essentially provide an opportunity for you to score your own cards or submit your own cards to be scored essentially for free, because you're providing a service to others in the hobby who are also participating.
DR says, has anyone ever said Cardscore seems like the Uber of sports card assessment or scoring? Have you heard something like that before?
I hear the Uber of sports cards a lot. That's certainly something that I hear often. In my view, that the word Uber of sports, the Uber of anything, is a little overused in the tech space. So I personally don't use it a whole lot, but certainly in the collector community, I do hear that. Somebody said to me a few days ago that when Uber first came out, nobody thought that. Everybody thought that the taxi companies never thought it would work because they never thought somebody would want to ride in somebody else's car. And so there's certainly a lot of those kinds of things when disruption takes place. I mean, at the end of the day, Cardscore is in some ways disrupting the hobby in my view in a positive way, but it's offering a new service to an already established hobby, much like professional grading did when it first came about. When professional grading first came about, there was an awful lot of people, and there still are an awful lot of people, who only collect raw cards, who don't want their cards professionally graded, or even crack professionally graded cards after they buy them because they prefer them raw. Less and less so than maybe 5 years ago or 10 years ago. But when professional grading first came out, I think a lot of these same questions existed, just more framed towards professional grading. And I think, in my view, in about 2 or 3 years, or maybe less, I think the folks who are now commenting skeptically may view Cardscore as a very accepted thing in the community and choose to pick on fractionalized assets or something else instead.
Fair enough. Mike says, so the cards at Cardscore are not sold on Cardscore, correct? There's no marketplace associated with this, is there?
That's an awesome question. I mean, I'm passionate about the fact that we need more peer-to-peer sales in the market. I mean, I was an econ major. I hate inefficiencies in marketplaces. And I don't even like paying my realtor 6% when I sell a house or buy a house, let alone pay an auction house 22.5%. And so, in my view, there's a massive inefficiency in how cards are bought and sold. And I think it's a big problem. And I think that peer-to-peer sales could do a good job in disrupting that. So when I hear places like, I think somebody mentioned Fanatics may end up doing it at some point, or PSA, I think has mentioned that they're even thinking about doing it. In my view, the more people, professional graders, Fanatics, anybody, the more folks that come up with peer-to-peer sales marketplace channels, I think is fantastic for the industry and helps decentralize it away from the powerful institutions. So we may do that, and in fact, we may do it sooner rather than later. We've thought a lot about that. We do get a lot of questions of, if I'm going to use you to score the cards, can you just sell the cards too? That kind of thing. And so I think we will do that. In terms of what form it'll take, I'm not quite sure yet.
Okay. I see a question here. I'm going to put it up, but we only need to look at the last part because we've addressed the first part several times already. But is Cardscore designed to help solidify the secondary market, or is it just for fun?
No, it is. It isn't just for fun, but it happens to be fun and add enjoyment to the hobby. It is serving a underserved part of the market. I used the example earlier of that Here's one right here. A 1986 Fleer Patrick Ewing, that card scored a 77. Now, I probably wouldn't send this card into PSA or SGC or anyone else to get it professionally graded. However, I did put it through the Cardscore system for $10 to see what it would come back as part of the process. We are also, I haven't mentioned this yet, but we are also going to be launching a registry system. And so one of the main reasons I send a lot of my cards in that I don't intend to sell into PSA in previous years was because I like the registry system. And so I would send cards in to get graded just because I want to be able to include it in my registry, not so much because I wanted it professionally graded for any sort of sales purpose, but just sort of for collection tracking and those kinds of things. But no, it's because it does serve an underserved part of the market.
Game Time Gallery makes the comment, says it takes innovation and thought leadership like this to keep the hobby moving forward. And it's commendable that especially considering the type of comments and questions we've had in the chat tonight, that there are still people like you out there that are willing to put your neck on the line, never mind your neck, put your money on the line, your personal money on the line, and try to not try, but to actually innovate and try to disrupt, create some change. And this hobby is filled with people who are very protective of the hobby and aren't that open to change. It's just the way, I guess, many people in the community are. There are some open-minded people in this hobby too, but there's a lot of people who are just very skeptical of anything and everything. And you definitely have the challenge ahead of you.
Yeah, let me comment on that for a minute. I mean, if you go into comments about a fractionalized assets or NFTs or really anything else in the technology world that is driving the hobby forward in new ways, you get those same some proportion of the same sort of naysayers or negative comments. So that's anytime you are changing a system or adding something new to a system, those folks who are very used to how that system has functioned may not understand it, may be surprised by it, may want to fight it. But that's what happens with pretty much any technological change and pretty much anything that occurs. Certainly is occurring in the other things in our hobby in terms of NFTs and fractionalized assets and computerized grading and everything else. So I don't doubt that it's in the crowdsourcing of scores as well.
Ian Undercover says, will you consider a way of rewarding the most accurate graders or weighting their scores to improve accuracy?
That's a good question. Rewarding the most accurate scores, yes. We did do that on the Jordan and Mantle project. We gave bonuses to people who, in our view, did the best job of scoring. In terms of weighting, we haven't decided to do that. I wouldn't say we've decided not to do it, but we don't really want to do that. We would rather make adjustments to the algorithms in terms of outliers and in terms of the top scorers, in our view, being able to score more cards and potentially earn more money. But I'm not sure that we would actually go to the point of weighting it on a per card basis differently. But we would certainly allow scorers who we think do a better job score more cards in the system.
Okay. Michael Ham says, I think this is a great idea. Love that it's not up to one person skimming a card for 30 to 60 seconds and making a determination. Mosaic Mind says, is Cardscore planning on developing a relationship with the existing grading companies, or are you competing against them?
I view it very complementary. I mean, we went through it a little bit earlier, but in my view, if you take PSA, for example, and in my view, it's very complementary to PSA. We're mostly serving a market that they currently aren't serving at all, but also in terms of cards that people maybe wouldn't submit in the first place to PSA. Also, a lot of people use it as sort of a pre-grading service. So there is a lot of, in my view, it's much, much more complementary than competitive. If we go down the road of offering computerized grading, and when we get verification, authentication, encapsulation, then maybe there would be more competition there. But we generally view it as a complementary service. And in fact, the first service that we offered only scored previously professionally graded cards. So we view it much more complementary, and we view it as a different service that happens to have some overlap in use cases.
Okay, thank you for that. Rock Latex says, should buyers of a Cardscore encapsulated card still be concerned about trimmed or counterfeited cards?
Well, we don't presently encapsulate cards. So, but once we get to verification, authentication, and encapsulation, then at that point, no, we will be vouching for the fact that the card is in fact authentic, and put our name and guarantee and resources on the line to defend that.
Game Time Gallery. I got to pick out some of the more positive comments, or even if they're geared towards myself. The market will dictate whether this will be a success or not. Very true, right? That's at the end of the day.
Yeah.
You will. This company will either be successful or not based on how the market responds. And thank you, Game Time. You're welcome for me pulling and inviting John onto the show. And John, I'm glad you were willing to come on tonight. Our scores.
I mean, and frankly, if I could jump in there, you know, we are already meeting and exceeding our goals. You know, we with only kiosks in, you know, soon 60 locations, soon to be 250 down the road or in the next few months, and only launching 150 of these, we're already very, very busy. There's a lot of cards going through that system every single day. And so if you log in to be a scorer, you'll be able to see that. But in our view, the community is already positively responding. Is it some smashing success that's, you know, all these the scorers are all making a ton of money and all this kind of thing? No. Not yet, but we are certainly exceeding our goals, and in my view, already gaining market acceptance.
Okay, well, that's great to hear. Sports Card Analytics says, in video games, free-to-play games generate the most money due to ads. Have you thought about making Cardscore free to consumers? I think it would be a good move.
Well, you can't, because you got to pay the scorers. So have we thought about minimizing revenue to the platform in order to maximize competitive pricing and payments to scorers? Yes, you know, we've thought about that. But ultimately, the scorers are providing a service, and the platform is just facilitating that trade between the scorer and the customer. And so ultimately, we're just a platform to make that intersection between the scorers and the customers. In order to pay the scorers, the customer has to pay something for it.
Fair enough. Fair
but
enough.
we could very well use these kiosks to provide a free computerized grading service. There are things like that we can do. So, you know, once you have the kiosks and once you have the home base unit, then the services that we are able to provide relative to the card that you upload could be dramatically more than crowdsourced scoring.
Okay. Algo James says, does Cardscore grade unlicensed custom cards? Well, score. I guess the right terminology is, does Cardscore score unlicensed custom cards?
A customer can upload pretty much any card that they want to be scored into the system. At the time that we offer things like verification, authentication, encapsulation, we will be far more picky about those cards that we actually encapsulate. However, for the purposes of getting a card scored, yes, you could put pretty much any card you want in there.
Junkwax Gems asks, curious if raw cards must be placed in a one-touch after scoring.
Well, must is an interesting term. We strongly encourage you to, because if you don't and it gets damaged, then if somebody does the verification, then it won't come back as being the same card. So you definitely don't want that card to be damaged after you get it scored. Otherwise, it'll fail the verification check.
Okay, good advice there. Cards and Coffee says, I do plan on getting a score key in a few days. Enjoy the platform. With getting a score key, will we get future updates?
Yeah, the score key can automatically be updated via the internet. So when we make software improvements, etc., that automatically goes down to your score key.
Mike Wick says there needs to be a banner that says this is not a grading service. I should have thought of that before, but yeah, that's my bad. Thanks for the tip, Mike. For sure. Yes. Okay. Yeah, we're at the bottom. Oh, there was, and I couldn't get to all the comments, but I did remember one. Are there any kiosks yet in Canada, or is it available in Canada at all?
That's a question for CJ. I know that we had interest from, I think, 3 different places in Canada. So I think we might have one either soon or on the way. We do have them around the world. We have one in Guam already, for example. We have interest in Australia. The overseas market is, as I talked about, underserved markets. There's underserved markets in terms of people, and in my view, age groups and youth. Underserved markets in terms of price point. Underserved markets in terms of response time, or how fast you get it back. Underserved markets in terms of the type of cards that you would actually score and or grade. But there's also underserved markets overseas. We talk to a lot of people. For example, we're putting one in the Philippines right now. We already have one in Guam. In some of these other countries, especially where there's military bases and those kinds of things, American military bases, U.S. military bases, there's a lot of collectors there. So certainly we've gotten a lot of interest internationally.
And tell me again, or tell all of us again, how many kiosks are there out in operation right now in card shops, if you're willing to share that?
Yeah, in the neighborhood of 45, it might be 50. We did our initial, what we called phase 1 beta. We did 60 kiosks. We did 30 of the big ones, and then 30 of the smaller ones here, and then we did 150 of the home base units. So we'll have 60 up and running, I would say, in the next 2 weeks. But right now that number is probably in the 45, 50 range. And we're placing another order, significant order, so we anticipate that number growing substantially, but it takes roughly a month to have them built.
Game Time Gallery says the service seems like the first step in the evolution of real-time authentication grading slabbing. I agree with Jeff Wilson. Soon that day will come when there will be on-the-spot grading, and you are saying that you see that happening next year at the latest, basically?
Yes.
Okay. Here's a question. This has come up a couple times. I apologize to everybody earlier, hadn't had a chance to get to it, but this has to do with authenticating or maybe even grading patches on cards and autographs. But I was wondering, how does scoring cards with autographs or patches impact the scoring complexities?
Well, in terms of the authentication side of that discussion, that wouldn't take place until we launch the authentication service. In terms of the scoring of the card itself, ultimately that's up to the scorers. We can provide guide rails to how we recommend that scorers handle various things, and we can provide training. But at the end of the day, it is crowdsourced scoring, and so that's up to the scorers, not up to us.
Okay. Terry Fortune says, "What is it? 100-point scale?"
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we have categories, and we average those categories. One question we didn't get today was that I've gotten a fair amount in the past is, do you treat each category equally? And the answer to that is currently yes. And I think we will continue to, but it was something that we thought long and hard about prior to finalizing our initial system.
Okay, Mosaic Mind says PSA has huge cachet in the market. That's why they can charge so much for their service. Is Cardscore aiming for similar cachet in the market or hobby?
We are aiming to be the best crowdsourced card scoring system in the market.
All right, John. Liz, I think we've exhausted the questions here. Where there's a lot of repetition happening now. I appreciate your stamina and putting up with me bringing in the same sort of questions over and over again.
Sure, no problem.
But I'm trying to find a balance here between having a nice conversation with you, but also being able to sort of serve the hobby that are showing up in the chat and asking some of these questions to the extent that they're asked in a respectful way. And they're not always done that way, but we, for the most part, we've had a decent experience here tonight. Anything kind of to finish this off? Any final comments, questions for me for the chat? Anything you want to put out there before we wrap this up?
No, what I would say is I would encourage folks to have an open mind about new technologies that come into the process. If you go back 15 years ago, a lot of people viewed professional grading skeptically or maybe as changing the hobby for the worse. We encourage folks to view new technologies with an open mind, whether that's new peer-to-peer systems that come out, whether that's fractionalization of cards, whether that's NFTs, whether that's crowdsourced card scoring. Technology provides a lot of additional opportunities to make our hobby more than in just an investment vehicle, something that's actually fun, something that you can do with your children. And I like the investment vehicle aspect of things, but there are other parts of the hobby as well. And I would encourage folks to have an open mind towards those things, and ultimately to fundamentally understand the difference between crowdsourced card scoring and professional grading. There will be additional services offered in the future in terms of authentication, encapsulation, those kinds of things, maybe computerized grading as well. But for the present time, we offer crowdsourced card scoring. We have 6,000 scorers who participate in scoring cards, and a lot of customers who enjoy the product. So we encourage you to check it out, visit your local card store where we have a kiosk, or order a home base for home.
Well, I appreciate those comments. You definitely have an interesting road ahead. I think I like the disruptive nature of it, and not so much as it's even disruptive, because I don't think I don't necessarily think it's going to replace, not in the short term or midterm anyway, professional grading services. But I'm open-minded to new things and see how they work. And if they don't work, well, then you'll deal with it. You'll deal with it yourself. But I appreciate you coming on, John. I want to take a second to actually right now, this is off topic, but I do want to just, we as the hobby, as the community, we lost a hobbyist today. I don't know if anyone out there heard, but a mainstay dealer who was, I'd seen him every year at the National. I don't know how old he was. I'm guessing around in his mid 30s to mid 40s in there somewhere, maybe even younger. I'm not sure. But a gentleman by the name of Terry Doolin just passed away today. Saw him just at the National this past like a month ago. And I know he had a lot of friends in the hobby. He was an easy guy to spot, and passed away from COVID apparently. And I just wanted to, just sort of, at the end of the day, even after an episode like this, where we might have some drama, some controversy in the chat, it's still, we're all still of common mind. We all still collect cards and love this hobby. And we lost a person who was definitely before his time, had a family, and I know he had a lot of really good friends in the hobby. So, on behalf of myself and anybody else who wants me to say on behalf of them, I just heart goes out to his family and his friends. And, let's try to be kind to one another. I know it's a challenge for some people out there, but let's try to be kind to one another and just be good and encouraging, and have some compassion and be open-minded as we move forward. All right, John, I'm going to go to some final thank yous from the chat, because there are several of those. So Brad, appreciate it. Thank you so much for joining us. Spurs Cards, great to have you. Thank you very much. Quentin Martinson wants to know, John, how would you score Tom Brady's wife? We'll just 11, 101. Yeah, no doubt. Big Unit, thank you very much. Appreciate having you. Sorry. These comments keep on pouring in. Jeremy Allen, thank you. Appreciate that. Sports Card Nonsense says Big Terry was a great guy. He certainly was. I couldn't even believe when I heard that today. It's just very sad. Thank you, Third and Long. Appreciate it. Thank you, CJ, for joining and answering questions on behalf of Card Porn in the chat. Appreciate it. Yes, Troy, it was just a crazy news today when that came out. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Can't Stop. Jordan, thanks for coming out. As always, thoughts and prayers for his family. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate the comment. Noah, appreciate you. Junk Wax, thank you so much. Chad agrees. Oh, boy, appreciate that, David. Tom says, much love, hobby family. Cherish your time because you can't get it back. Live to be the best you possibly can. Always strive to be better, kinder, and more sincere. Hardcorn says, and the hex on all the shills. Okay, these comments are coming in too fast. I can't even keep up. But thank you, everybody, for joining tonight. And John, thanks again. Hang tight right there. We're going to end this, guys. I'll be back with Ryan Nolan in about 10 minutes on After Hours. We are going to talk about his card show exploits over the last little while and whatever else Ryan from Breakout Cards wants to talk about. He's a great guy. You'll enjoy it. So tune back in 10 minutes. And and also join me tomorrow night on Collectible Live with Mike Kantz will be our special guest. And that's going to be a fun show as well. All right, everybody. Thank you. John, hang tight.